You ever seen a greased up man race up a pole to win some cash? Today we're going to cover 6 different ways people sacrifice or give offerings. 3 are going to come from Taiwanese folk religion, 3 are going to come from Christianity. Almost weekly we see these little tables in front of homes, stores, filled with fruit, paper money, incense, and more. We'll see them outside of 7-Eleven. People just be like working there, but also worshiping gods. This is what could be referred to often as ancestor sacrifice or an offering. There's lots of different versions of it. Sacrifices and offerings are technically different, but you can also use the same words to refer to the same thing. So it can get a little confusing. I think one of my favorite ways to explain the difference was there's this old sermon illustration. So there's a chicken and a pig and they're walking and they see a sign that's like, ham and egg breakfast, donations accepted. And the chicken's like, I think we should donate. And then the pig is like, I want you to know that when you donate chicken, it's an offering. But when I donate as the pig, it's a sacrifice. I hope that sums it up. Like, sacrifices cost something, sometimes a lot. Sacrifices and offerings don't always look the same. Like, they can be very different. So sacrifices can be wild. Like in Geelong, they have this festival where they burn boats filled with spirit money that we've shown a couple times, and they send them out on the ocean, and it's like,
So when you sat down to write this installment, were there certain elements you wanted to include?
I want the cars to drive fast and then some of them explode.
It can be fun and competitive and dangerous. So like Canggu, which we haven't shown a lot of footage of, but we filmed, there's people greased up climbing these giant poles to try and get favor from the gods. And it can be somber, like the Kong festival that we showed in one of our videos and how they were begging for forgiveness from the gods. Like, there's lots of different ways that sacrifices and offerings can be involved in worship. And we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what an offering or sacrifice itself looks like today, but hopefully we will in the future if you're interested in that. Number 1 of the 6 types of offerings and sacrifices we're covering today. The first is the offering to appease hungry ghosts.
That is just so insensitive. You know ghosts can't eat. I'm hungry.
Hungry ghosts are this really famous aspect of East Asian folk religion, and Taiwan spends a lot of time invested in the hungry ghost type of economy.
超好吃的，这是什么鬼啊？
谁叫我？超好吃的！
So a hungry ghost is someone who has died, but wanders the earth in kind of this perpetual hunger and thirst. Because they're wandering around looking for sustenance, they might latch onto you and bring you misfortune, or even do some pretty horrible stuff to you. During the ghost month, people burn offerings to appease these spirits. And the events of an appeasement might relate to something like a scary moment in history. So in Geelong, there was this time period where Taiwan had martial law. So a group of American missionaries saw trucks of Taiwanese locals headed to a beach, and then a couple days later, bodies started washing up on the shore, and they realized that the people had been killed. And that would give a lot of negative energy to the land. And if people die in the water as well, they might become water ghosts. So people killed in violent or dramatic ways, they stick around haunting a place, and the beach became the site of this famous Geelong floating mansion festival, where they make these elaborate mansions, they fill it with ghost money, they put it on the water, it goes out to the sea, and it kind of lures the ghosts away. And it's a really interesting tradition, and some people think it's related to this historical event. But you see here that when something happens, there's this idea of like a negative event, so I have to appease the ghosts or appease the spirits. And so a lot of the worship is going to revolve around that. So the second type of offering we see is transactions with gods. In the same city of Geelong, we observed that they had the city god, and then the wife of the city god. And she was surrounded by perfume and cosmetics. As a foreigner, it's hard for me to know if there's like a deep meaning for that god specifically, if his wife has some sort of a reason that they gave those to her. But what we do know is some people might worship a different god for fertility or prosperity or for beauty. And so these different worship practices are going to be transactional towards that god and kind of relate to it. Most commonly, what you're going to see is offerings of food, paper money, and maybe a specific meal for a god at a temple. But if someone's really wealthy, they're going to go and find like an opera troupe or martial arts troupe or puppet troupe. Anything that has the word troupe in it, they're like, I'm getting the troops. And then they're going to have like dragon dancers and stuff. They'll spend money on that. And then at the temple, you're going to see a lot of these performances. And you might think, oh wow, that's cool, paying so people can see these performances. But it's actually for the gods. The gods who are sitting there as a conduit through the idol. Remember, they're not in the idol, but they're able to observe and see this like really fun show and be like, oh, that tickles my funny bone. Ha ha ha, look at that beautiful dragon and its dance.
Who's ready for a dragon dance?
And what you find out is that as you're walking the streets here, you see a lot of temples that just have like a puppet show. Nobody's watching it because that's not the point. The people are worshiping merely to worship their God. That's what their performance is about. So rather than appease, transactional offerings are this way to get favor or to leverage a God to help you with something. It shows you'll spend a lot of money on them, so like maybe I'll help you too.
You give me a gift, bam, thank you note. You invite me somewhere, pow, RSVP. You do me a favor, wham, favor returned. Do not test my politeness.
Third reason we see offering sacrifices is ancestor veneration. In homes, they're going to have ancestral tablets, and they're not going to have a carved image of their ancestor. Actually, that would be a bad thing. The only time you're going to see an image related to the ancestral tablet will be at the funeral itself, because the person's not a fully formed kind of ghost at the time and not a fully formed spirit, and there's a lot of funeral ritual being involved with that. There's this real fear too of the people who are closest to you that they'll become ghosts, or maybe in vengeful spirits, or they'll be reincarnated in a bad form. And so there's a pretty serious way that they treat death.
What if Dwight dies and I still owe him something? That is a recipe for a ghost.
You compare, contrast, living compare, contrasto. Christianity has its own sacrifices and offerings, and Jesus changed much of how that was done. So the most important reason for sacrificing Christianity was forgiveness of sins. And you see that all throughout the Old Testament with their Passover and their Yom Kippur, and it's not a pretty sight. So families would actually have to take these animals and they'd raise them, and then they'd have to actually ritually sacrifice the animal to cover up sin. And that was really heart-wrenching. I actually remember having this weird experience once in Malaysia, walking into a mosque where they were having this celebration. They were sacrificing goats, and then they would give the goats to the community. And there was hundreds of goats being killed, and you could hear the screams and you saw blood running down the streets. It was this brutal, terrible thing. And I just kept thinking like, this is horrific. And I thought about all the death and how sin is the cause of that. In the Bible, the first sacrifice is when Adam and Eve sinned. And when they sin, they're naked, and God sacrifices a lamb and he clothes them. And this is to cover up their nakedness and the shame of that moment. Death enters the world because of sin.
Gotcha! It's just me, Death.
Christians no longer sacrifice because we have Jesus who came and he paid for our sins. It changed our sacrificial system. The second way Christians do offerings and sacrifices is offerings for blessings. So during the time of the Old Testament, God laid out these clear ways that Israel would be successful. So they'd have like a whole harvest, they get a lot of barley, and God would be like, give me the first fruits of your barley. I'm gonna give you even more barley. And people are like, I'm in.
I told you cornfields are awesome!
But if they didn't, they could have a great harvest, but God wouldn't bless them. So today, Christians don't worship to get a blessing, at least in the physical sense. We don't think that because I do something on earth today, I'm going to get a physical reward. And that's because as a Christian, the life to come after this earth is more important to us, and we think that that's where our reward's going to be. So it kind of changes your mindset. So Christians still do offer for a blessing. Like Hebrews talks about, we have to believe that God rewards us for what we do, like that pleases him. But we kind of think of it as like one day when I die, there's going to be that reward in heaven of understanding this faithful service to God. But we're not going to see that on earth. We don't connect that, like just because I run into a burning building, save a bunch of orphans, and give my paycheck to a church, we don't think that God's going to be like, oh, you're so giving. Here's more paycheck. In fact, we actually think life's going to be pretty hard, and we're just not going to see a one-for-one transaction through our offering.
What am I going to do with the award? Nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do. That's the least of my concerns right now.
Then the third way that Christians offer today is a worship offering. So they're not doing it for blessing, and they're not doing it because of a sacrifice to cover up sin, but instead, Romans says that Christians should present themselves as a living sacrifice. Being a living sacrifice is the primary offering that Christians engage in today, and our goal is to spend our lives being poured out for God and his will, even if that means physical punishment, torture, or death. And for most of us, it's not that dramatic. Like, Christians have it pretty good in a lot of areas of the world. For many Christians, though, it can also mean giving up your entire life, like your real physical life. Like since ancient times, Christians have been persecuted for what they believe. That persecution is common even today in many countries. And even if a Christian is a great citizen, they're caring and loving and they give to people, the Bible says that they're going to be persecuted because the world hates the message of Christianity. So do you find the sacrifice systems interesting? Should we maybe do a video diving deep into the actual sacrifice? Like you got a table, like what are all the items on it? Let us know in the comments if you're interested in that. And if you have a moment, please subscribe. And as always, we are grateful for you, our audience. So they're gonna see a lot of energy. They're gonna see a lot of energy. My tongue keeps slipping over itself, so.